almost there. All right, so taking off or going back, I guess, on some of the stuff that we covered last time, I decided I would talk about a couple of things and try out this newfangled camera setup. So, well, I guess I can get a little closer to that. The other thing that happened is that I left here on a Tuesday. Wednesday morning, I've got an order for some newels that were 3 5/8 square. They happen to be about 54 inches long. But what they needed was probably one of the harder turning things, and that is a square pommel. This wants to be absolutely square. So that was one of the things that I said, let's just talk about how you might make a square pommel. Before we do that though, let's, I guess, back up, and I'm going to turn this around. And I'm going to talk for a second about a regular pommel cut that we might make. Now, if you work with an architect, and I'm going to step away from the camera for a second, but one of my pet peeves, and I hope you can see this, is that I'll get a blueprint and they'll show me the shape they want the newel to actually be. And so it will be a drawing like this, 3 5/8, and then there will be a pommel cut, and maybe that goes in a bead, whatever. Okay, but this is the pommel cut that they want, and you're supposed to make that happen. But the minute you set the thing on the lathe and you turn the lathe on, these corners are way out here. Because when you turn it, you see the diagonal of that. So instead of seeing a 3 5/8 circle, it's like 5 inches, 5 1/4 inches. So the question is, okay, how do I do that? And so what it amounts to is, what's the pommel cut going to look like on the 3 5/8 square? So in many, many instances, basically what you've got to do is you've got to figure out what that's going to be when you extend that out there. Okay? And it's one of those details that's, well, there's two things about it. First of all, for you, as somebody who's going to try to duplicate these parts, you're not exactly sure what they want. And secondly, when you talk to the architect or whatever, they don't have a clue what you're talking about. So it makes it very, very difficult. But if we look right here, you know, there's our pommel cut here, but when we turn this thing on, this is turned so it's just down to the size of this particular square. Just to illustrate where that actually is, size-wise. And to make one, if you just have to make one, it's a piece of cake, so just wing it, right? Just start cutting, and whatever it comes out to, that's fine. But when you're going to make several of these things, basically what we do is we take, okay, what's your base size, which is right here, and then what is the curve? How much curve is it going to be? And what I do, and I'll do a layout here, maybe back a little ways, but if I were doing one of these, this might be where I want this pommel to actually make the transition from square to round. And then I'll determine what do I want, I call it my setback. What do I want there? And let's make it 1/4 of an inch, okay? So what I do in the layout process is I don't make a full line of that. I just make little small lines on there so that when this thing is turning, does the dark line show up? Yeah, here's the dark line. That's going to be the bottom of the pummel cut. And then you see right up here, that lighter line, that's where I want the angle to actually stop. The rest is history. Before I forget it, I put up on the board here, I actually learned a lot about the basics of spindle turning, and I had been doing a lot of it before this, but it made more sense to me back in the early 90s. The college bought a CNC lathe, one of the very first ones made for schools. And the programming of it was actually very simplistic. You had a starting point and you had an ending point, so you'd give them 2 sizes, and then you would tell the computer, how do you want me to get there? From this point to this point. And what it turns out to be, there are only 7 cuts to any spindle. And I put these cuts up here on the board just to show how simple they actually are. And straight across, obviously. If we want a straight shot, point A, point B, get there, straight line. Okay? The next couple, we take what's going to be a bead. And a bead, as you know, is 2 cuts. It's not 1 cut, it's 2. We start from the center, and we talked about that. You know, we would have a line right here on our turning, typically, that would signify the center of the bead and the maximum diameter of that bead. But the bead is 2 cuts. It starts at the top, goes to the bottom, it's a curve, and we're going to cut in that direction. That's the one thing that I didn't put on here. This one, we can go either way, doesn't matter. We're going straight across, right? Okay, so we're going this way, and then we're going to go this way. And as long as we keep that in mind, we're going with the grain, turning downhill, and it's going to come out fine. The only caution is that when we're dealing with the square piece of wood, and usually we've got a parting cut maybe down in here, that when you go to make that, you start up here and you make what I call practice cuts. Because the only cut you really have to worry about is that last one. Don't just go and say, okay, let's do it in one pass. Even an 1/8 inch bead, today, I wouldn't think of taking a gouge and making an 1/8 inch bead in one pass. It would be at least 2, because the first one is a warm-up to get ready for that. Likewise, a cove, we're starting at the top, and on the cove, of course, we're going down. But the cove, the most important thing is, that is 2 cuts, okay? Slant up and slant down are the last 2, and again, we're going to cut with the grain, cutting downhill. That's the easier one. You know, you see a lot of turnings, or I used to see a lot of turnings, where on the spindle, there's a pretty pointy piece of turning. And you take a look at it after it's done, and there's some missing pieces. It looks like a saw blade. And if you ask the person about it, they say, damn wood. And absolutely no reason. That should be razor sharp. And if you follow these guidelines by always going up here and coming down, and then up here and coming down, that'll be a piece that you got to worry about getting cut when you actually do it. Okay, a little bit of an aside, but I think it's an important one because it actually, I think, simplifies spindle turning a great deal. And that technology of the CNC lathe went out the window, you know. It lasted for a little bit and then the companies all went defunct and I wouldn't have a clue how to do that today. Okay, so I've got a couple lines on here, so I'm going to turn this, it's about 1818, which was a good year. Now, when I'm doing a pummel cut on a piece of wood like this, I'm basically going to use a gouge. Whether it's a spindle gouge or a bowl gouge, I can care less. I want the gouge, and what I'm most concerned with is the bevel angle, because that's what's going to make that cut. Okay, but you want to get a tool that's fairly stout. So I've got 3/4 of an inch here, so let's just take this down. Feel those babies coming. We'll put this right in here. Okay, now I've got about 3/8 of an inch to go. So I do, when I explain it to some people, I say, I sneak up on it. And I'm practicing. So what I'm going to do, I know I want to end up with that point right up there, and that black line is going to be at the bottom. I know right now that the curve that I've got was way too flat. And I want to stop and show that you don't have to worry a bit about any chip out here. Pristine. Again, because you're going downhill. Now, if you back off a little bit, it may be trouble. The other thing about these cuts is that they're a bear to sand. So you don't want to leave any grooves on there or anything. In other words, whether it's a 1 3/4 spindle or a 6-inch newel, that wants to be one free-flowing cut, at least a finished pass, so that you can get that to where it's actually got to be. I'm almost where I want to go, so I'm going to go right up to the edge now. I think I might have to go just a tad bit more, but you can see we're right at our points here, and I'm a little long. Okay, that's maybe it's not a 16th, but it's a 32nd. But that's a nice cut. So what we can do again, rely on the bevel, bring the bevel right in there. And that's going to give us our nice cut. I'm putting in for a raise. Okay, enough of that. Let's do the square one now and see what trouble we can get into with that one. Whenever I get a job that comes in and I take a look at either A, the sample they've got, or B, the drawing, and I see a nice square pummel, I want to throw up. Because I know that's going to take me the longest of anything to do. So, what we're going to do, we're going to come back here, we're going to cut another one of these square pummels. The significance of these lines is that these lines are going to determine, obviously, whether or not we're straight. Now, for me, having been around a lot of stair parts, I think these are ridiculous. because, you know, kids bump against these things. You got these, even if you ease them just a tad bit, you know, very, very sharp.
Dirt catchers.
Yeah, dirt catchers. I think we should outlaw them. That would be my take. I would be all for it. You know, this is running a little bit out. That's because I turned it on my lathe at home, and this one is a little bit different, so. Let's get over there. Make sure I'm at around. Now with about 5/16, I'm going to start practicing, and the key is to line your bevel up with that black line. That's the whole key right there. So I'm going to turn this sideways. Notice that the fluid of the tool normally in a bowl might be at like 2 o'clock. This is like 2:30, 2:45. It's not over square because you want to expose enough of the gouge so that right here on the side is where you want that cut to take place. So we're going to line that right up. Now, you feel a little bit of vibration there. To eliminate that, just don't take as big a cut. I can make another cut here now that won't vibrate like that, because I'm not going to take as big a cut. Right in here. And I'm just going to keep working my way right toward that line. Now the telling tale is when you take this off, and you can see that, well, I hope you can see, I've got a little bit of a curve there. So probably it's touching out here at the corner, but I've got close to a 16. That one really didn't. This one shows a little bit better. There's the edge of my cut, and there's my line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reference off this outside corner right here, because usually in these situations, this distance this way is critical, because that's going to line up with either the bottom of the stair balusters or another newel or something. So we don't want to see what we did there. I may have to go one more. I would say I'll go just the width of a pencil line is how much more I want to go. And then the check obviously would be to put a straight edge on there, because that's what people are going to see. But really, in reality, that's all it is to the pommel cuts. A lot of people fear pommel cuts. They take a lot of time, but they're really not hard to do. I mean, you could stand here all night and work with these things, but you don't have to. Okay? Now, so what I thought I would do here is we'll just make a bead, let's say. So we're going to make a bead right here, and what I always do is I always mark the center, and I'm assuming here now that this is the diameter that I actually want. So, my go-to tool for cutting beads of any size, believe it or not, is this 3/8 spindle gouge. Use this little rascal for everything. But even though this is going to be a bead here, we're going to make it out of several cuts. Is that showing up top here?
Yeah.
Now, a little secret on turning beads and other details is we use a pencil line to delineate where that feature is going to be. I ought to take a second. Let me just round this up because this is vibrating and it's driving me nuts. Another little trick, or whatever you want to call it, is that when you use your parting tool to establish the sides of your bead, leave the line and maybe just a touch of wood, because this is going to be a scraping tool, right? So when I go in here and I make this cut, these edges right here are all going to be torn grain. So we want to leave enough wood so that when I do come down there, when I do come down, my last cut is going to go right to the bottom and take off just about a 32nd of an inch right down there. Now, the good news, I have a couple of grooves. I don't know if they show, not really. But on the side here, this is not really nice and smooth. It's got a couple of... So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically do some shear scraping on the side of that just to get rid of those couple of little grooves. Same thing over here. Don't try to be too aggressive when you first start doing this in terms of taking too much stock off. Notice that we've still got, I'm going to take this a little bit more off of there. We've still got our center line, and we're going to keep it that way. Because that was our, got to get that out of the way. That was our sizing tool. And when you take a look at these, they're not perfect right now, but there's absolutely no torn grain. I mean, that's the beauty of spindle turning. You got the grain going this way, so you can work right on it, and you don't have to worry a bit. So that's a bead, and a cove, a little bit harder to do, but what you can do is just start small. Go to the center. Try not to go too much beyond the center point. And then it's a good idea to check your depth. The good thing about a cove is nobody is probably ever going to measure it. I'm just going to clean that up a little bit. A little bit of sandpaper. And again, you know, what we're doing with the sandpaper is just taking out the ridges. left by the tool. It's pretty hard. I mean, we can do it better on the outside here with a bead, but even on here, you know, there's just a couple little ridges, a little piece of 180 on your finger here. And that cut is going to be tough. Now, the most difficult, and I don't have an example of it, but the most difficult cut is one detail where you've got two curves coming together at a point in the bottom, but there's no way you can do a parting cut. Now, you can do a parting cut to get you part way down in there, okay? Let me just show you what I'm talking about there. Again, I just got to round this up so I can see it here. But one way to do this detail is to use your parting tool, and if you can measure on your drawing, if I can just shoot over here for a second, what I'm talking about here is a detail that comes down here and then comes down here. So what we're going to do is we'll go in there with the parting tool, get as close as you can, and hope that works. So I've got my parting tool there, and now it's just a straight V cut. And usually it's a curve, so I'm going to continue with that suggested area here. I've done half, now I'll do the other half. But even though we can't measure that, you can feel pretty confident that that's going to be about the cut that we actually want. Now, the other way to make that type of a detail is to use the skew. Now, you know, a lot of you probably practiced with the skew. If you're like me, you practice and practice and practice, then you put it on the shelf and only use it when you really need to. You know, some people swear by this thing. They can cut beads and everything else. The only thing that I use the skew for is for laying it on the top of the piece like this and doing a planing cut. I'm taking a little bit too deep a cut here. And the thing about doing the planing cut with the skew is that you literally can get out the 220 sandpaper and just finish that up. And probably the 220 sandpaper is going to make it rougher than it actually was. And the whole notion of beads and so forth, you're simply going to take this tool and just lift the handle and bring that right in around there. Now that is, it's actually a shiny, I don't know if you can see the sheen on it, but that's a shiny, shiny cut. But it's going to give me a heart attack trying to do that, so that's not good. Getting back to what I was talking about before, you know, if we had two diverging curves, what I would do with this is use the skew with a long point down and cut a V, and then make the V wider and deeper. It is important that you stay centered to where you where you want that cut to actually be. You know, and now we would just bring the curves in. So there's a couple of ways to do that particular cut there. The main thing I wanted to emphasize, and I'll do it when I'm doing this cut right here, hopefully you'll take a look at the back of the tool. Now my tool is all dusty, except for a shiny mark right down the middle, because all during that cut, the bevel is rubbing, okay? When I start up here, and I start going around this way, I tried to make it a little more, I don't know if you can see it, probably can't see it on here, but there's a nice shiny spot right there. And that tells you that bevel is rubbing, and if you do that, there's not going to be any torn grain whatsoever out here on your pieces. So basically, that's what I wanted to cover. I had just a few more tidbits that I wanted to cover, and you know, if you have any questions or anything, fire away. I probably can't answer them, but I'll try. You know. Any questions? I know. I did a good job. All right. So let's do this. For next month, we will do sharpening.